even though the band's name might suggest it, we're not gonna talk about Norse mythology in this video. Fenrir plays sweet folk metal, topped off with lyrics that feature paganism and fantasy. But if you look hard enough, you can find some historically themed songs among their discography. This is the case on their first full-length album, Echoes of the Wolf. I know that the sad struggle of Scotland's fight for independence has been discussed on this channel before, but there are 3 good reasons why we're still doing it again. First, this is a different incarnation than Grave Digger's rebellion is set in. Second, Scotland actually carries away a victory here. And third, I love the song, so I'm doing it whether you like it or not. The song I'm talking about is called The Battle of Stirling, and it uses some weird form of the English language, but I spared no effort and decoded it for you. Now, listen and hear what happened in Stirling. So the location of the historic event should not be a problem to find out, since it's literally in the song's name. And if that's not enough, the band reminds us again in the first line of the lyrics. Stirling is a city in Scotland that was often regarded as a strategic gate to control the Highlands, like it was the case in the First War of Scottish Independence. This war marked the beginning of a series of conflicts between England and Scotland, and broke out in 1296, when English King Edward Longshanks I attempted to invade the northern half of the British Islands. After the death of King Alexander III, a power vacuum had spread in Scotland, and of course, your friendly neighborhood Englishmen stepped in to fill it. Naturally, the Scots did not much agree with being ruled by someone else, and soon open revolts broke out all across the country. Within the chaos of these riots, a young, patriotic hero arose when he murked an English sheriff and most of his garrison at Lanark. Fenrir already mentions him in the second line of the song, William Wallace.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Yes, this guy. Well, not really. That's Mel Gibson, of course. The real Wallace supposedly looked more like this. And if you have seen the movie and think you already know what happens next, let me reassure you, you don't. While being an epic movie, Braveheart still has more historical inaccuracies than naked butts. I'll be sure to mention some along the way. For example, there probably shouldn't even be any butts in the first place, as kilts were not introduced in Scotland until 1600, and face paint has not been used for a few hundred years at that point as well. Oh, also, when the Battle of Stirling took place, Wallace is estimated to have been in his late 20s, which makes him 10 years younger than this old hag. However, despite his relatively young age, Wallace already had a reputation, as well as experience as a Scottish freedom fighter, and when he heard that the English were marching toward Stirling, just as the song says, he and Andrew Moray, another rebel leader, moved their own 5,000 to 6,000 troops to meet them there. Their adversary is also mentioned later in the song, English commander John the Warren, Earl of Surrey. His army outnumbered the Scotsmen by around 3,000 soldiers, but this was an advantage he would not be able to use. Because unlike it is shown in Braveheart, the song is accurate once more, stating that the battle actually took place on Stirling Bridge, a wooden pathway across River Forth that only offered space for 2 horsemen to cross it simultaneously. Man, what is it with English getting baited into bridge-related traps on their own island? I have to say, I like the overall accuracy of the song's lyrics. The only thing I have to nag about is this particular line. It makes it sound as though the rebels were ambushing the unsuspecting English forces. However, that is not the case. Warren knew the position and strength of his foe when he arrived, and even decided to wait a few days with the attack, as he realized he was in an unfavored position. His negotiation attempts did not bear fruit, as Wallace refused to make any peace. On the morning of September 11th, 1297, Warren found he had waited long enough, and commanded the attack. King Edward's treasure master, Hugh the Cressingham, was leading the charge across the bridge. Well, charge is a strong word. It was probably more of a careful skulking. Wallace and Moray didn't engage until a significant number of Englishmen had crossed over to their side, aiming to take out as many soldiers as they could. Then they brought forth their spearmen to make short work of the English cavalry and surrounded the remaining troops, cutting off their way back over the bridge. Nicely covered in the song. Cressingham makes his appearance as well now, and I gotta say, it's not very fair. Yes, it is safe to assume that he was amongst the slain, as Wallace is said to have made a sword belt from his skin. But I couldn't find any proof that Andrew Moray was the one killing him. Well, maybe it's meant metaphorically, as in Moray's men cut down Cressingham. But even then, as much as I favor the Scottish warriors in this one, it would have been fair to mention that Moray suffered mortal wounds in this battle as well. But other than that, the rebels really messed up their foes by reducing their army to less than half of its original power, while losing only a few men themselves. Some English fighters managed to swim back across the River Forth, but most of those that carefully crossed the bridge never made it back. Warren, who remained south of the river the whole time, must have thrown quite the tantrum given his situation. In theory, his army was strong enough to take out the rebels, especially since he commanded real soldiers and his adversaries were mere farmers, but his disadvantageous position kept him from achieving victory. He ordered the bridge to be destroyed and fled the scene. The rest of the English army began to retreat as well, running into another Scottish rebel force in Falkirk a few days later. While the defeat did not have a huge military impact itself, it most definitely yielded a strategic one for both sides. England, shocked by how easily their knights and trained fighters were overwhelmed by the weakly equipped peasants, started to take the rebellion more seriously, until even King Longshanks himself would lead an army north. The Scots celebrated their triumph, and with Murray out of the picture, William Wallace was soon elected Guardian of Scotland, giving him the actual authority of a military leader. That position might have been given to him a bit hastily though, as just 1 year later, in 1298, William Wallace was defeated at Falkirk for good. He had to flee and hide, and even left Scotland for some time. Then, later, in 1305, he was betrayed, not by Robert the Bruce, as the movie shows it, but rather by the snitch called Sir John the Menteith, and executed in London. The First War of Scottish Independence raged on until 1328, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Guerrilla warfare, betrayal, and shaky peace treaties marked 30 long years of battle that ended with a peace treaty and Robert I as King of Scotland. And yes, you guessed it. If there's a First War of Scottish Independence, there's bound to be a second one. And so, the sad story of Scotland's independence continued once again, just 4 years later. But back to the band. I really like what they have done with the historical setting, channeling the high choral vocals, and using an abrupt yet very melodic musical theme to encapsulate the dynamic battle situation. They did their research for sure, and I like how they tell a more accurate version of the story than the famous and more popular movie everyone knows. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know, I complain about that a lot. Please don't get me wrong though. I love Braveheart as a piece of entertainment, but I'd rather see it as a fantasy story set in the Middle Ages than having an actual historic plot. What I wanted to say is, go and listen to more Fenrir, right now. Well, look who did not go listen to more Fenrir. Thanks for watching anyways. I hope you learned something new today. I appreciate any comments on this video, and also make sure to check out our other stuff at Heavy Magic. If you have any bands or songs you want to see covered in the future, just tell me. We also have a Patreon, just thought I'd mention it. See you next time, and until then, stay true.